Okay, so in this second video, I want to go over texturing. In the last lesson, we figured out how to make shapes, choose the colors for those shapes, how to use different brushes. Now I want to make those shapes look more three-dimensional maybe, or give them patterns on top of them. So the first thing we always do is you go to a new canvas, screen size, and I have my background and my layer 1. I'm actually going to change the color of my background. And the way you do that is you click on the background layer and your options already come up. So I'm going to go down to disk, so I get my color wheel, right? That's right down here. And we'll make it, I don't know, we'll make it like a really dull brown. I'll do that for now. I'm going to go back to layer 1. I'm going to pick my brush that I'm using, and I'm going to pick a color. Now all that's left is to make my first shape. So I'm going to make kind of, let's see. I make kind of like a tiki mask shape. Kind of looks like little silly alien eyes. That's all right. Then I'm going to fill it in. So I have my shape on layer 1. And now I want to give it a texture. Now, you can go into your brushes, and you can look through some. There's even a category called textures if you wanted to give it like wooden, right? Or some grid pattern or some polka dots. I'm going to go down to, let's see, we'll try industrial. And I like this one called Twisted Tree. I think that sounds like what I want. So now I have my brush that I want. I'm going to make it a different color. We'll make it darker. And I'm going to draw, I'm going to change the size first. I'm going to draw over my mask, but there's a problem. I think this problem is going to be shown a little bit better if I make it lighter, so I'll show you in red. I'm trying to texture my shape, but my brush is getting on the outside of it. And even worse, let's say I didn't like it and I wanted to erase it. My mask is getting erased too. Now, from lesson 1, we learned that what we could do is we could draw on another layer. So I'll get my brush and I'll texture it, but I'm still having that problem even though it's on a different layer. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go into our layers. Now we have layer 1, which is our shape, layer 2, where we're going to put our texture. I want you to just click on it, right? Just press it with your finger, with your pen, whatever you're using. All these options on the side show up. I want to go down, not to mask, but to the one below it, clipping mask. If we press on that, a little arrow should come up here. It's a little teeny tiny arrow. And it shows it's pointing down to layer 1. That means that this layer is attached to that layer. Now, if I draw, nothing's happening over here, but as I move over to my shape, you can see I'm drawing on my shape. Not outside of it, only on it. Now, this is how we texture individual shapes. So I want to do, so I'm going to use my twisted branch, my twisted tree texture, and I'll put it over here. Maybe I'll make it darker on the bottom and lighter on the top. I think that's kind of cool. But I have a problem. I think that this is too dark and this is too light. I think my texture is too strong. So what I want to do is I want to go to my layer that has the texture on it. I'm going to press on this N. N, in this case, stands for normal. Normal means that whatever I draw, that's what I'm drawing. Whatever brush I use, whatever color I use, that is what is going to be rendered here. That's what's going to show up on the screen. So we're going to click on N for normal, and we get all these different options, and it's very intimidating because there's a bunch of them. The first thing I want to show you is opacity. That just means how clear is it. It starts off at maximum, and as I go down, you can see what's happening to my little tiki mask. The texture is disappearing. So maybe one way to solve my problem is to only put it at 50%, halfway. That might be cool. Another way is to look through these different blending options. So we're on N right now for normal. But let's say I wanted to go to lighten. Now, only the lightest color is showing up, and I'm missing all the rest of it. So I don't love that, but it's still good to know. Let's try some others. Color burn. That looks kind of scary. Overlay. That one looks kind of cool because it's still using the brown from underneath and allowing the other colors to come through. Soft light is doing something similar, but a little bit more gently. And we can scroll through these and we can just see what they do. And each one is going to be almost completely different from the last. Now, when you find one that you like, you can close it just by tapping anywhere, tapping out, tapping the layer again, and closing it. So now I have my mask, and I like the texture that I had, but it still looks kind of flat. I want to make it pop more. I want to add some shading. Now, a good brush for shading, if we go onto our brushes, is going to be airbrushing. I'll show you why in a bit. We're going to go to soft brush up here. So airbrushing, soft brush, and of course, shadows, shading. We're going to start off with black. Now, I'm not drawing right on here. I'm going to go to my layers, and I'm going to make a new layer. And even to help me, I'm going to tap on it. I'll click rename at the top, and I'll type in shadows. I think that'll help me stay organized. All right, so I tapped on it, I went to rename, and then I called it shadows, so I know. So now that I have my airbrushing brush that's in black, I'm going to start shading in the sides, but I have the same problem I had before. I'm drawing on my background, I'm not just drawing on my mask. So we'll go to layers, we'll click on the layer I want, you go down to clipping mask, and now look, now I'm only drawing on my mask. And I can do some cool things with this. If I use the big brush, I can make big shadows. If I use a smaller brush, obviously, I can do smaller shadows. And it's kind of starting to pop. But shadows are only half of what makes something three-dimensional. We have shadows and we also have highlights. Highlights are the opposite of shadows. It's kind of where the light shows up, right? So I'm going to go to white. And I'm going to do the same thing. Make it a little bigger for the top. And notice how I'm drawing outside, right? My pen is outside because if it was on it, it would be too bright. The cool thing about this airbrushing brush that I have, if you notice, it starts off really strong, and as it gets further to the edges, it becomes softer. So by drawing on the outside, I'm only getting the softest part, which is really helping it not come off too strong. All right, so I have my 3D mask, and let's say, just like we did before with the texture, let's say I think my shadows are too strong. I can go to my shadow, I can click on my N for normal, and I can mess with the opacity until I find something that I like. I can also change the blend options here until I find something that I like. I think I like overlay, but I'm gonna decrease the shadows to here maybe. I think this looks like a pretty cool kind of three-dimensional mask. But I want to show you something really cool. You do all this work. If you were doing a painting and you wanted to change the color of your mask, it would be very difficult. Where's my trusty syrup brush? Inking, syrup, here we go. You would have to recolor over everything. And every time you put a paintbrush over your shadows or over your texture, you would ruin what's underneath. But because we worked in layers, and I can click on just my mask, right? And if I use this little checkbox here to get rid of it for a second, it doesn't delete it, it just shows you what it looks like without it. I still have my original shape without shadows, without textures. Now, if I have that selected, I can click any color that I want. I can drag it and drop it. And it only affects that bottom shape. This is why it's so important to work in layers and to always make sure that you have the right layer selected. I can make this whatever color I want, and I'm not destroying all the great work I did earlier with my textures. So maybe I'll settle with, I think that looks kind of cool, like a sea green texture. Looks like it's made of jade or something. But there we go, right? Textures, shadows, shapes, and we can have this beautiful 3D object. Now, what you can do is you can go back and watch the video, and instead of making a little mask like I did, you can make whatever shape you want. And you can follow the same exact steps. You might have to use a different texture, put the shading and highlighting in different spots, but if you follow these steps, you can make any object look three-dimensional, all right? So go back, watch it, try it again with some random stuff, and then we can move on to the next lesson. Awesome.